Welcome everyone to the 2020 Voltaire Awards by Liberty Victoria. It is traditional, especially in Victoria, to begin any public event with an acknowledgement of country, and no matter where you are in Australia or where you come from in Australia, you'll be familiar with the nature of the acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the country we meet on. For myself, I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and most of you, I expect, are in the same circumstances. But in welcoming people or acknowledging the country we meet on, it's traditional in Victoria to acknowledge the facts that are helpful and pleasing to us, but to ignore the facts that are difficult for us. So we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet on, but we don't acknowledge that our ancestors took it from them. And we don't acknowledge that taking their land from them caused them immense harm. And it was done on the legal theory that the Aboriginal people did not have a concept of ownership, and therefore they didn't own the land, and therefore there was no one to take it from, hence terra nullius. What we did not recognise at the time is that the connection between Aboriginal people and the land was like the connection between a child and their parents. Now, most children would not claim to own their parents, despite their behaviour. But the fact is that removing the land from the Aboriginal people caused them immense harm. And we then redoubled that harm by taking the children from them. And nowadays, in Australia, Aboriginal people are in a peculiarly difficult position. Most Australians, many Australians at least, regard them as no-hopers. And I think that what we need to do is to acknowledge that maybe we had some part in their present position. And when we do that, then we will have a more respectable place in this country. So with those words, I seek to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Now, I've been asked to make some opening remarks, and I think it is reasonable to start by asking what is it that Liberty Victoria is about? Liberty Victoria, over the years, it was established in 1936 by a bunch of people from various parts of the community, lawyers, artists, political people and so on, and from both sides of politics, Liberal and Labor alike. It has committed itself to doing everything it can to improve circumstances in which our people exist, in particular to make sure that the rights of human beings in this country are properly respected. That necessarily means that we are not necessarily popular a lot of the time, although the fact is that Liberty Victoria has done a great deal of very important work, in particular in establishing or making submissions to various parliamentary committees in relation to legislation that is proposed. And I think it's very important that people should realise just how much work Liberty Victoria does to make sure that we are protected from the shortcuts which politicians find it far too easy to take, which means you sacrifice the liberties of individual members of the community to the benefit of the political classes. Now, why the Voltaire Awards? The Voltaire Awards are named, of course, after Voltaire, which was the pen name of the Abbé Arouet. And Voltaire was famous for his opposition to the Roman Catholic Church in France, and also for his commitment to the ideals of free speech. He was an outspoken advocate for civil liberties and was always at risk from the strict censorship laws of the Catholic French monarchy. His voice and his ideas are said to have played an enormous part in the formulation of the American Constitution, and in particular, the First Amendment to the American Constitution, which is Article 1 of the American Bill of Rights. Article 1 of the American Bill of Rights says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for the redress of grievances. That is probably the most important of the articles of the Bill of Rights. It's one which has been respected widely until very recently under President Trump, when he has actually sent his troops to attack peaceful protesters, especially in the park immediately outside the White House. The award is given annually to the person or organisation who's made an outstanding contribution to free speech, and going backwards, or rather going back to 2012, David Marr was the recipient. The year after that, Arnold Zabel. The year after that, 2014, Yushu Lipsky. Then in 2015, the three Al Jazeera journalists, Peter Grester, Bar Mohammed and Mohammed Fahmy. In 2016, Waleed Ali was the recipient of the award. In 2017, Professor Julian Triggs. In 2018, Magda Zabansky, and in 2019, Debbie Kilroy. And this year's recipients, in my opinion, are just as deserving as before, and they uphold the traditions of the Voltaire Award. Now, I'm obliged to say, and I apologise for this, but tonight is not only a night of celebration of the work which has been done, especially by the recipients of the Voltaire Awards, but it's a night to support the ongoing work of Liberty Victoria. Now, I want to start by thanking a lot of you who are in attendance for your generous donations this year. Without donations to Liberty Victoria ceases to exist. So it's thanks to you that the fight to maintain our civil liberties continues. Now, we've posted a link in the Q&A section, and you can use the donate button there, which is very prominent, or you can go to the Liberty Victoria website, which is www.libertyvictoria.org.au, and there you'll find that you can donate fairly easily. In fact, we try to make donation as easy as possible. It is really important that the work of Liberty Victoria continues, and it is with your help that we can do that. Now, let me start by introducing, first of all, the Young Voltaire Human Rights Award. The Young Voltaire Human Rights Award honours and celebrates people who are under 30 years of age, who speak out or write or campaign or whistleblow or otherwise take action or stand against authoritarianism. You're probably aware right now that people as young as 10 years old can be treated as having criminal responsibility and be put in jail. So you ask yourself, how well developed was your sense of moral responsibility when you were 10 years old? It's really outrageous, and it's a matter of national shame that people as young as 10 can be thrown in jail. And there is at the moment a campaign called Raise the Age being led by legal experts, doctors and justice groups to convince governments around Australia to raise the age of minimum criminal responsibility from 10 to 14. Last financial year, there were 600 children between 10 and 13 in custody around Australia. More than 60% of them were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children. There is a meeting happening on next Monday where the Attorneys General of the various states and territories will consider raising the age of minimum criminal responsibility. Let's hope that they will be listening in tonight. And so with that, it gives me great pleasure to announce that Dujuan Hoosan is the winner of Liberty Victoria's Young Voltaire Human Rights Award for standing up for children's rights and advocating for governments to do better than they're doing at the moment. Dujuan is an Arrernte and Garawa boy who grew up between his two homelands at Sandy Boreout Station, which is near Alice Springs, and Spring Creek near Borroloola. He was chosen for this award because of his courage and determination in challenging governments to change the age where they can imprison children. He's been a passionate and tireless advocate for children's rights. At 10 years old, he starred in and was collaborating director and an additional cameraman for a film which you may all have seen recently in the Human Rights Arts and Film Festival and on television, called In My Blood It Runs. The film is a feature documentary about his life growing up in the Northern Territory. The film travelled all around the world to film festivals. It was nominated for 2 Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Arts awards. The AACTA used to be the AFI, and was the critics' pick for the New York Times. Last year, aged 12, he was the youngest person ever to address the Human Rights Council at the United Nations, where he asked global leaders to support Australia to raise the age of minimum criminal responsibility from 10 to 14. That's in line with the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights, and for First Nations people to be taught in schools. Dujuan Hoosan and his advocacy represent everything that Young Voltaire Human Rights Awards stand for. He stood up for the human rights of children and changed the white version of history and culture taught in schools. He continues to speak up for and advocate on behalf of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. Now, he lives in the Northern Territory without access to Wi-Fi, and he's unable to be here with us live. But because he can't be here tonight, he's provided us with a written speech, which I'll now read out. Dujuan's speech says, "Thank you for this special award for getting rights for us kids. I want you to listen again to my UN speech. Adults and governments are still not listening. Now I'm 13 years old. I come from Arenta and Garwa country. I'm the star in a documentary, In My Blood It Runs. It was filmed when I was 10 years old. My film shows how I felt like a failure at school. I was always worried about being taken away from my family. I was nearly locked up in jail, but I was lucky because my family, they know I'm smart. They love me. They found a way to keep me safe. There are some things I want to see changed. I want my school to be run by Aboriginal people. I want adults to stop being cruel to 10-year-old kids in jail. I want my future to be out on land with family, strong culture and language. My film is for all Aboriginal kids. It's about our dreams, our hopes and our rights. I hope you can make things better for kids like me. Thank you, Dujuan Hoosan." Now, I think it's really important that everyone present tonight bears in mind that Dujuan's acceptance speech is directed to every one of you individually. He wants every one of you individually to do what you can to make sure that the dreams and hopes and rights of Aboriginal kids, and for all kids aged between 10 and 14, should be respected. Now, we've got 2 film clips to show. The first one is from the documentary In My Blood It Runs, so you'll get to see him. Now, I'm sorry that we did not get sound with those film clips. I have no idea why that is, but blame it on technology. I wonder how many people noticed at the very start of the film clip, one of the signs being carried by Aboriginal people was no mining on sacred land. And that brings to mind immediately something we should never forget, which is that in May, I think, of this year, Rio Tinto, with government permission, destroyed the Dujuan Gorge caves, which contained Aboriginal artworks from 46,000 years ago. And to put that into perspective, the pyramid at Giza is 4,600 years ago. So we destroyed something which is 10 times older than some of the most respected human artifacts in history. We're lucky we didn't get an uprising of Aboriginal people at the destruction of their past. In any event, congratulations to Dujuan Hoosan as the recipient of the Young Voltaire Human Rights Award. The next award is the Voltaire Human Rights Award, which does not have an age limit on it. In 2019, We broadened the criteria to embrace. Hang on, I'm getting a message from someone. I'm just being told that we are investigating the tech problems with Dujuan's films. If we find a solution, I think we may have a chance to re-show those clips. In any event, in 2019, we broadened the criteria to embrace for this award for anyone who's made outstanding contributions to human rights, free speech, or civil liberties, with particular emphasis on taking action to progress freedom, respect, equality, and dignity. And for the outstanding work which he has done in advocating for equality, visibility, representation, and meaningful inclusion of people living with disabilities, I'm pleased to announce Dylan Alcott as this year's winner for the Voltaire Human Rights Award. Dylan is probably best known as a Paralympic gold medalist and Grand Slam tennis champion. He's also passionate for people with disabilities and advocates tirelessly for them. He's received this award for his advocacy for respect, equality, and dignity of people living with disabilities. As he has pointed out, people with disabilities are the largest underrepresented minority group in the world. 1 in 5 Australians live with some form of physical or intellectual disability. So we're proud to award the Voltaire Human Rights Award to Dylan, and we have a video of his acceptance speech.
Hey everyone, it is Dylan Alcott here. First and foremost, I want to say congratulations to Dujuan, who won the award before me. The young Voltaire, mate, keep doing what you're doing. Absolutely dominating. And I just want to say a big thank you to everybody from Liberty Victoria for this award. I don't really see myself as like a human rights activist, to be honest. You know, I've had my disability my whole life, and I'm just me, and I'm really proud to be me. And you know what, there are 4.5 million people just like me with a disability in Australia, nearly 1.4 billion people around the world. And for a lot of those people, it's pretty tough to have a disability. You know, it's really hard to find work, hard to get a job. It's really hard for accessibility, to travel, to do all kinds of different things, to date. You know, there are so many misconceptions and stigmas that are out there that make it hard for people with disability that so they can do the things that they want to do. And I just try and live my life to show examples of what we really can do, but also advocate so people can get out there and live the lives they deserve to live. And pretty much all people with disability deserve to live a normal life just like everybody else, you know what I mean? And that's why I do what I do. And if that is being a human rights activist, well then, you know, that's pretty cool. Obviously, I want to send my love to everybody at the moment. This is a really weird time for everybody, especially with all around the world with what's going on with COVID-19. I'd love to be here in person accepting this award. I promise you, you know, when all this is done, we can all get together and have a beer and celebrate. I'm currently preparing to go to the US Open in New York in a couple of weeks. Wish me luck. Yeah, as I said, this means a lot to me. It's very cool. I really appreciate it. And if I can leave you with one parting message, you know, please don't underestimate what people with a disability can really do with their life when given the opportunity. Really appreciate everybody, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, now I have been told by message whilst that was going on that we are going to try and replay Dujuan's videos. But while that's being prepared, can I just remind you of what I said before, that this is not just an awards night, and although it's not actually a fundraising event, we just think that with a captive audience, it'd be nice to remind you of the importance of getting donations in order to enable us to keep doing the sort of work that Dylan just mentioned. Now, I assume I'll be told in a moment that Dujuan's work is ready to go. But if not, I'll just keep on hounding you about donating to the cause. The fact is that you can use the donate button on your email or in the chat or on our website. Also, we do accept cheques, those old-fashioned things, remember? And if you want to make a donation by cheque, the postal address is GPO Box 3161 Melbourne, 2001. which you can also find in the comment section of the webinar. So with a bit of luck, we've now got Dujuan's videos again.
The first one that had the magic was the first people that had the land.
What do you get? What do you want?
History runs in straight to all the Aboriginals. Travel all the way through from my blood pipes all the way to the brain. And when I'm a man, I'm gonna fight for rights for black people. Like when I see a crowd walking past, I'm gonna lift up my son and say, leave black kids alone. And I'm trying to speak to the Prime Minister and say, stop killing Aboriginal people.
And next, I think we have, do we have an audible version of Dujuan's speech? No. Message. Do the second one right away. Okay.
Thank you. Give the floor to the Human Rights Law Centre.
My name is Dujuan. I'm 12 years old. I'm from Marinda and Garwa country. I came here to speak with you because the Australian government is not listening. The adults never listen to kids like me, but we have important things to say. I am the star in a new documentary, In My Blood It Runs. The film shows that I felt like a failure at school. I was always worried about being taken away from my family. I was nearly locked up in jail. I was lucky because my family, they know I am smart. They love me. They found a way to keep me safe. There are some things I want to see changed. I want my school to be run by Aboriginal people. I want adults to stop crueling 10-year-old kids in jail. I want my future to be out on land with strong culture and language. My film is for all Aboriginal kids. It is about our dreams, our hopes and our rights. I hope you could make things better for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the Empty Chair Award. The Empty Chair Award is given to a person or people who are worthy to receive a Voltaire Human Rights Award, but can't be present to receive it because they've been silenced by the authorities. Now, it's an interesting irony that with everyone locked down at the moment, the two recipients of the Empty Chair Award can be present where they are at the moment because they don't have to actually go anywhere. Now, the two recipients of the Empty Chair Award this year are Bernard Collaery and Witness J. Witness J, not Witness K. The secret trials of Bernard Collaery and Witness J challenge some of the most fundamental bases of our legal system, which is the requirement for open justice. Now, as you may be aware, Bernard is accused of sharing protected intelligence information by helping his client, former spy Witness K, expose Australia's alleged bugging of the Timor-Leste government officers in 2004. The alleged activity took place during negotiations to divide the lucrative oil and gas reserves in the Timor Sea between East Timor and Australia. Bernard is reluctant to speak about the facts of the case, so I invite you to Google East Timor Cabinet Office bugging, Alexander Downer, offshore oil treaty. You'll there get a detailed Media Watch report from June 2018, a Wikipedia page, and many other items which discuss the bugging of the East Timor Cabinet Office, bugging by Alexander Downer, or he ordered it apparently. Bernard's law office was raided in 2013, and he and witness K were charged under an act designed to protect our national security. That act was passed in 2018. As in the witness J case, the Attorney General issued National Security Certificate to keep some of the material to be used in this trial classified. The court has recently upheld a certificate, and that part of the trial will be held in secret. Arguably, you will know more about Bernard's case by looking at Wikipedia than by trying to look at news reports of the case. Witness J was the subject of a secret charge, secret jailing, secret trial, and secret imprisonment. And frankly, until a journalist in the Canberra Times disclosed the matter, I think late last year, or might have been middle of last year, no one knew about it. And when he was told about it, the Attorney General of the ACT did not even know that witness J was imprisoned in a jail in the ACT. Perhaps to keep him well out of sight, the authorities had him put in the sexual offenders and pedophiles wing of the Alexander McConaughey detention centre, although the offence, which we are not allowed to know about, had nothing to do with sexual offences or pedophilia. Now, Bernard will speak first. The circumstances surrounding witness J are such that he is not allowed to be identified in any way at all publicly. So his speech will be read by my most talented intern, Hugh Wetherill, and in the Q&A session in which he will take part, any questions that concern him will be answered via Hugh Wetherill. But that is because he has officially been disappeared. I mean, he disappeared when he went to jail, and he's no longer regarded as having an ordinary existence in this country. So I would now call on Bernard Collaery and congratulate him profoundly on this great award.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julian. Well, of course, I'm deeply honoured just to be with you. You yourself, you're a great leader in all of this, and it's just so humbling to be with you and to follow such a distinguished group of awardees, my predecessors. And more to the point, I was reading recently about Liberty Victoria's work in, I think, receiving H.G. Wells in 1939 in Melbourne, when he came to criticise the failure of the Lyons government to provide the refuge for Jewish refugees. So for many, many reasons, particularly because I myself am marked by the Second World War, I'm deeply honoured to be here this evening with Liberty Victoria. Now, particularly for the lawyers watching tonight, imagine your clerk in your chambers saying, you've got an appointment such and such time next week, someone's got an employment matter, I've set it down, you're not in court that day. Well, that's how I came to be in conference with someone now known as Witness K. Witness K wanted a finding of unlawful conduct. The reason why he wanted a finding of unlawful conduct was that there had been a change to the moral order as he saw it. There was a situation that had arisen that he was extremely unhappy about. Disgruntled is the word, although he has been smeared in that term subsequently and described, and I'm quite sure the Shadow Attorney General has been briefed to say that witness K was just a disgruntled employee. I'm so old to recall, and I once had a privileged position to recall what was said in Moscow every time, particularly after Perestroika and Glasnost, when there was a Soviet defector. It was some disgruntled employee who didn't get promoted. I mean, that's the smear that has gone out in these briefings. And I'm saying deliberately smearing people in this circumstance needs to be proscribed conduct. But moving on. So who would have thought that attending a person who wanted a finding of unlawful conduct would lead me to being charged with conspiring with that client? The lawyers know that conspiracy is a catch-all. It used to be a sort of rug that you could throw over if you couldn't quite find a particular charge. You'd charge conspiracy. And conspiracy is an ongoing thing. It can be compounded. And the great irony in this matter is, of course, that after due research, I determined that there had been a conspiracy at common law to defraud. It doesn't matter the details of the fraud. There was a conspiracy in Canberra to defraud. Common law conspiracy. It so happened that as Attorney General here years before, I had assisted and insisted during the bottom of the harbour days that in the reform and development of the Commonwealth Criminal Code, we retain common law conspiracy to defraud, because one never knows the ingenuity of tax evaders and the rest. Who would have thought that that decision by the standing committees of Attorney General that we made to recommend not to do away with that common law offence would know that that's going to come to the fore if I get a public trial. It's not just me, Julian, on trial. It'll be trial of the unlawful conduct that I gave advice to witness K. Witness K followed my advice. I'm charged with conspiring with a person who came to me for legal advice. It's an ominous situation for our legal profession and a very serious one. It's not what I even heard a judge say recently, that it arose from some feelings of unjustness for the Timorese. Certainly it was unjust for Timorese, but the matter is there had been a criminal conspiracy to defraud. That was a finding that Kay sought, and that was a finding I am almost certain that would have transpired if my chambers had not been raided, our brief seized, and a spanner put in the works of a hearing that Australia was bound by treaty to attend in The Hague, a hearing that Timor, with my advice and acceptance of that advice, we'd appointed an eminent British judge who had conducted security matters in the past in the United Kingdom as Timor-Leste's representative on that three-person panel. Australia had appointed a distinguished and eminent United States lawyer who, incidentally, had written extensively on fraud, international fraud. Well, we found that rather interesting. And those two had selected their chair. The hearing was to be in camera. That is, the hearing of any evidence from witness K, and all the right arrangements had made that I was used to for confidentiality. So much for suggestions of any threat to national security. So that is our country. And I see that today Civicus, the international agency that judges democracy around the world, has now removed Australia's standing as a free democracy, and the listing is now a narrowed democracy. I call it a fragile democracy. So here I am, humbled by this prize, not a prize I ever set out to get. The other charges against me, Julian, as you know, are that immediately after the raid, the seizure of my brief, Emma Alberici, who I knew from conducting an Iraq war inquiry in the United Kingdom, she had followed that inquiry, a very, very far more sensitive inquiry than anything to do with Witness K. She put me immediately onto the evening ABC show, and I told what the Australian people needed to know, that we had a government that was misconducting itself. I can't go further because I'm subject to these anti-terrorist orders. Our country is fragile, Julian, and my profession, my occupation, your profession, and all of us lawyers who work in this area where justice is called, we are at risk at the moment in this narrowed, fragile democracy. I do say that receiving this award lifts my spirits. It's been a very, at times, dispiriting. I can't do trial work, and I'm dependent now on the generosity of supporters, partly. Recently, we subpoenaed the records of Woodside Petroleum and ConocoPhillips. Their response to my solicitors was that I should put aside $100,000 to $150,000, but would be their cost of attending to the subpoena. A very generous benefactor from Melbourne put up that money, and then the attorney's officers attended the court on the return of the subpoena and said that they wanted first access, and the documents were cabinet in conference, national security and privilege, so it's come to naught. This is an awful battle. It's the sort of thing that I think our colleagues in Moscow are going through. Our colleagues in Beijing aren't going through it because they're already being jailed. But as you know, Julian, I face a jail sentence, and I face, like Witness J, I presume, going to some Canberra gulag in silence. So I just round off to say that's where we're at in this country, and we need to join forces because these are dark days.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Before I pick up a couple of your points, can I say I've been reminded that people who want to ask questions of any member of any of the recipients should use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, not the chat box. Now, Bernard, I'm interested you refer to the smear, which makes perfect sense. And I just want to make the self-evident point that Liberty Victoria exists to help disclose the smears that our government is willing to inflict on people. And the fact that you say that the matter can't go any further because of orders, you can't go any further because of orders that have been made. I'm seriously tempted to ask this out of order. What's the prospect, in your opinion, that Alexander Downer will face charges?
Well, Jack Waterford, former deputy editor of the Canberra Times, has been a great Australian Federal Police watcher over the last 30 years while I practiced here. Jack says the AFP aren't known for investigating with any detail the shenanigans of our politicians. So I don't hold out much hope from the Australian Federal Police. But if there is an open hearing, how possibly can any government not refer what I want to say if I can say it, about what the change culture was, and I repeat, what the change culture was the witness came to me about. I can't say now, I've been silenced, what that change culture was. Witness K, a person of great integrity, a patriotic Australian. If only you knew Witness K's background, if only the people of Australia knew what a loyal, wonderful, courageous Australian Witness K is, at least I can speak out, think of the circumstances of Witness K tonight and every day for all these years while he's been deprived of a passport, a peaceful retirement and simple moral peace and stability. It's so wrong.
Whilst you were saying that, Bernard, a question came through from Witness J. He says he wonders whether you are aware that he sought your legal advice late last year and that he was denied by his former employer to access you because you weren't approved by them.
The first I know of that. The other shambolic act that damaged, I suspect, our national security was that I learnt about the raid on my chambers probably after the Australian media knew. I was asleep in The Hague when it was going on. And what it told the Chinese, what it told the Russians, what it told the foreign powers was that there was a lawyer in Canberra who was acting, following the statement the Attorney General Brandis made in the Senate, that was acting for a member clearly of the intelligence service. So my records, 30 years of records, were left exposed. I was out of the country with my entire team except for one of my clerks. And that act, in doing that, in exposing the nature of one side of my practice, was completely irresponsible, and we don't know and will never know what went on with respect to 30 years of my records. So if Witness J was unable to use me, it's funny that no one has come back for my records about anything else. And I would be absolutely astounded if Witness J was told that apart from the Witness K matter, there's ever been an issue between me and that agency.
Thank you. I think that might be a perfect time to invite Hugh to read Witness J's statement.
Thanks, Julian. So as Julian foreshadowed, I'm reading this speech on behalf of Witness J. So here's what he has to say. Ladies, gentlemen, and variations thereupon, I've been humbled to learn that I am a joint recipient of the Voltaire Empty Chair Award and have the honour to share with my fellow secret trial alumni, the distinguished Mr. Bernard Collaery. While our respective criminal matters are at different stages, it is a fair assessment that we are both very much engaged in this legal fight against an emerging secret Australia. Mr. Collaery has my deepest respects and I wish him well going forward. I accept this award proudly and wish to thank the esteemed Julian Burnside and his team at Liberty Victoria and any others who have laboured to bring about this award and event both in the past and in more recent times. Firstly, I must apologise that I cannot deliver this speech myself. The Australian government has deemed my identity, as it pertains to the linkages with this situation and the non-diplom Witness J, as verboten. If I was to forego the Australian government's threats, I would likely see myself swiftly imprisoned again, and if that were to happen, I fear that certain emerging details around my situation would be lost to a public who I ardently believe have a right to know. One of the hardest things I've done along this journey was to hand back my Civilian Operational Service Medal. I received this medal for working alongside Australia's Special Forces in our nation's contribution to defeating Islamic State. I went to Iraq as a spy and proudly earned this medal, which sat among those I'd earned earlier as an officer in the Australian Defence Force. I'd heard stories from my own uncle, a decorated American veteran of the Vietnam War, who angrily threw away his own medals on the steps of the US Capitol in 1971, rejecting the significance of those precious awards as a protest to a war that he saw as immoral. I never understood it. How could he have thrown away those prestigious symbols of national recognition? Symbols that recognised his honourable duty discharged, regardless that the war's premise was rotten. In returning my own medal, I wasn't protesting the necessity to challenge Islamic State, but rather my own country's betrayal of me as one of its most committed and loyal servants. I didn't theatrically hurl my award as my uncle once did in front of a roaring crowd, but instead quietly handed it to a member of the ABC in protest, despite wanting to personally hand it back to the Director General of the secret organisation that awarded it to me. For the first time, I felt a true understanding of my uncle's position, and in many ways, similar to Mr. Collaery. This award from Liberty Victoria, which I share jointly, has soothed the pain I've felt since relinquishing my treasured medal in March. It is fair to say that I am deeply angry about how I've been treated, and in particular, the failures of the secret intelligence agency I worked for in the events leading up to my incarceration. That I could not legally name this secret agency or disclose my real identity of my own volition is a scary indictment on a nation that was founded with democracy and freedom at its core. Perhaps now is the time to inoculate ourselves and our civil liberties with a formal Bill of Rights. After secretly serving 455 days in prison, I was released on recognisance in August 2019 and quietly re-entered society. Since then, it has become a matter of public record that I worked over 2 careers as an intelligence officer, serving in flashpoints like East Timor, Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere abroad. Often under diplomatic cover and always serving Australia's national interest, both in war and peace. As a former intelligence officer, I'm acutely aware of why the foreign intelligence and security apparatuses exist. There are those truly in the world with evil and violent motivations, and at times I have come face to face with the men who would do our families harm. However, informed as I am, I can also clearly and authoritatively assert that Australia is slipping quietly and disastrously into an authoritarianism that cannot be justified by the threats that exist in the world today. The seething anger inside of me has driven me to pursue justice against my former employer. And behind the scenes, my lawyers are building a case to hold them accountable for their gross negligence in failing me when I needed mental health support. Had I been provided this support on any of the 3 occasions when I begged senior intelligence officers for it, I'm confident that this journey would never have unravelled. And while I have atoned for my sins through the practical demolition of my life, the continuing anonymity of my former employer and the unrealised accountability for their own part in this mess is still deeply concerning to me. But why fight, you might ask, and not simply go about my business and rebuild a shattered life in the shadows? In answer to this hypothetical, I am reminded by certain words spoken by Theodore Roosevelt. If I must choose between righteousness and peace, I choose righteousness. I too have chosen the path of righteousness over peace and intend to be a thorn in this emerging security state's backside for as long as I can muster the strength. I implore you to all stand shoulder to shoulder with me and say loudly, enough, and that secret trials, secret prisoners, and a creeping authoritarianism are ideas that freedom-loving people reject without reservation. While I take no enjoyment whatsoever in being Australia's first secret prisoner, I would take immense pride in being her last. Witness J, July 2020.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Witness J. And can I just add right now my congratulations both to Bernard and to Witness J for their award, because it is, I think, in every respect as important as each of you seems to recognise. Now, we're going to be starting a Q&A soon with Bernard and Witness J. If you've got any questions for either of them, make sure and enter it in the Q&A section of the screen. I have had a couple of questions come through, and actually I should mention that Witness J, we say that he was incarcerated on secret charges. He now is lucky enough to have Robert Richter QC acting for him. Robert, in my opinion, is probably the best criminal advocate in this country. And Robert texted to say that he's acting for Witness J and still does not know, despite trying, he does not know what Witness J was prosecuted for, what offence he was convicted of. Now, how can that be? How can that be in this country? We have such high ideals about what this country is about. We really ought to know. We really ought to know things like that. It should not be possible for a person to be charged secretly, so secretly that even after they're released, no one is allowed to know what charge they were convicted on. Now, before we start the Q&A, as I mentioned before, for all of you who believe in human rights and the right to free speech, this is, although not a fundraising event, is an event at which we can raise funds. And you might consider becoming a human rights or a civil rights defender. This is the accolade attained by people who become regular monthly givers to Liberty Victoria. It's a program that helps sustain the day-to-day activities of Liberty, and it helps make sure that we are properly resourced to be able to take on every human rights challenge which is necessary. So if you're able to give even $10 a month, I would respectfully ask that you consider tonight not leaving without joining others who are willing to support Liberty every month. Obviously, if you can afford more than $10 a month, that'd be great. But bear in mind that every amount that Liberty receives makes a big difference, and every amount is a strike in the battle to protect our human rights. So I hope I can count on you. Now, very shortly, we are about to start with the Q&A for Bernard and Witness J. And so far as Witness J is concerned, that will be through Hugh Wetherall, who just read Witness J's statement. And so if there is a bit of lumpiness in the question and answer process, just take it. Now, can I start with a question for you, Bernard? Assuming the case against you fails, what will the greatest impact of the case have been?
Myself? Well, it's just, as you know, Julian, if you take a long holiday as a barrister, it's very hard for briefs to come back. It's very difficult. And they say when you go into a Royal Commission, I've done a few more than year-long matters, and you find there's very little afterwards sometimes. And people think you're preoccupied still with the commission or the inquest or the inquiry. So my practice has been ruined. My retirement, comfortable, probably was going to be a fairly sparse retirement anyway, but it's now not a comfortable prospect. And I have children and grandchildren and children in school and university with the name Collaery. It's not a nice thing. I mean, I hope they're proud of their grandfather, but it's not nice. And particularly at primary age, children don't really understand. They just hear jail and trial. So I think just the injustice of it, there's just such awful karma for me to be about to go into the dock of the court where I've spent my career. It's Shakespearean. It's, well, it's pretty tragic, really. It's wrecked everything. I don't think I ever could have imagined that this appointment, this man coming in who I couldn't turn away, could not turn away, this man coming in to see me, a man whose operational background I knew nothing of in terms of anything relevant, but I'm never going to walk out on seeking justice. I know where you come from too, Julian, so that's just where we come from as lawyers. And we have to lump it, and I'm lumping it at the moment.
Thank you. I should say, I misspoke before. I said that Robert Richter acts for witness J. He in fact acts for witness K. How bizarre that he's still not able to find out what he did. Perhaps he learns more by tuning in tonight than by asking the authorities. And I did have a question for witness J, which is, what's been the greatest difficulty you've faced since you left prison? Sorry, we'll just have to wait for Hugh to learn what he's to say in answer to that.
Hi everyone, sorry, just getting information from Jay. So his most concerning point in terms of getting out of incarceration is actually having two identities, and that's been the hardest part, in that he has his Witness J identity, and then he also has his personal one, and the fact that he can't connect the two within the crippling orders of the Canberra justice system, unfortunately means that is the hardest part about going about his daily business, that you can't disclose things between friends, partners, that he was once whoever this person is, that he's now Witness J, and vice versa. So that's the hardest part, yeah, hopefully.
Okay. Well, now, I'm told because of the nature of this event, I'm going to get questions from people out there, and they will be sent through to me, and then I'll get to ask you. So it's kind of tricky. But, so forgive me if I'm reading from my phone. Now, I think, Bernard, this is a question for you. Has Witness K actually pleaded guilty, or simply given notice that he may do once proceedings are commenced?
Well, as you would have done many, many times in your career, you sometimes intimate to a court that, subject to the police statement of facts and the circumstances and any victim impact statement, etc., subject to discussions and negotiations with the prosecution, my client is minded to plead guilty. That's the circumstance, as I understand it. I haven't been present in court, but there's been an intimation that Kay is considering pleading guilty. It's an intimation, it's not a plea. He has not pleaded guilty to anything.
Now, there was a decision by the judge hearing the matter on the application of the Attorney General, Christian Porter, to suppress evidence. Now, is that the ruling which has been appealed? Or has that ruling been appealed?
His Honour brought down a multi-page reasons for judgment. The judgment, in short, was that the core of my trial would be in secret. We were reading that judgment a few minutes later in the room adjoining the court, and Mr. Porter's officers came into the room and asked for the judgment back because they were of the view that His Honour shouldn't have produced it on his own laptop, and the judgment contained matters of national security significance. And so I never got to read it. There is now produced, extraordinarily, I don't think we've ever seen it ourselves in our lifetime. The judge there was another hearing on another day. The attorney's officers, I want to make clear, the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecution representatives have no play in most of this, next to nothing. They're on the sidelines. This is Attorney General Porter having his officers in court. I'll come back to that in a moment, but the judge was asked to redact various things by Mr. Porter's office, and the eventual outcome is that there is a unredacted matter, that judgment that's secret, that the media and Australians can't read, and there's a redacted one. So there it is. In respect of the role of the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions, Julian and I, as Attorney General in the ACT, was very keen to create the Office of DPP in the ACT, and that came in. I think the bill was drafted, or the Act was passed, and then my successor, Attorney General, joined it. We all know that after the Guildford Six in the UK, the Independent Director of Public Prosecutions was established in the UK. It followed in 1985 for the federal government here in Australia. So why, in these more than 35 court appearances, are the proceedings dominated by the Attorney General, politicians, his representatives, and why does the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutors have so little to say? What we're seeing is another bulwark of democracy eroded as well.
Now, your trial involves some criminal actions by some politicians. And generally speaking about the law, when it comes to national security legislation and criminal acts, what recourse is available for keeping politicians to account in the intelligence space? What mechanisms would you consider adding to our current landscape, given that Australia's got more anti-terror legislation than any other Western country, so far as I'm aware?
We've got to repeal this legislation. It was the legislation is being used at the moment against myself and Witness K as a fig leaf to cover the coalition's shame. I doubt that there'd be more than 1 or 2% of Australians who believe that this is a fair go, what's happening. The fig leaf is to use laws that were introduced to tighten up on national security post 9/11. If you read the Hansard debates, there'd been a problem in a trial in Canberra. That has been suggested to have been the reason for it. There were other reasons, but the fast passage of the bill was pushed on the opposition in the context of terrorism and the steps we had to take to fight terrorism, that terrorists would use the court to prolicize, that they'd find out the identity of Secret Service agents, and they'd learn techniques and the rest. I mean, what possibly could relate to national security in a hearing of the nature of mine, where we have none of those issues in contest whatsoever? We simply want, I simply want, and Kay simply wants, a finding of unlawful conduct and what flows from that. Because Julian, you know Lungi, the High Court decision in Lungi is better than I do probably. And of course, the public, the Australian public, are entitled to know about matters involving the parliamentary executive if it would concern and be proper for Australians to know. And the wave of disgust in relation to this matter sweeping Australia, particularly the legal profession, suggests that it is, in the terms of the High Court, a matter Australians would want to know about and a matter of concern to them.
There's another question which I think you may be able to deal with. It's when will we be able to read what Justice Mossop said on the suppression of evidence?
I don't know, I haven't got it yet. You do know that the orders against me are that I can only talk to my lawyers in Sydney, only in a room that they've surveyed, cleared and checked. And I need to go to Sydney to read documents. There is another safe somewhere in Canberra where a very, very decent colleague of mine, a member of the bar, is again giving me pro bono support. I can go to his chambers if he's there, and he's a very busy barrister, and read documents. So I haven't had the opportunity yet to read the full judgment. It was taken away from me just afterwards. We've got an extension of our time to appeal because of this delay, and we'll almost certainly be appealing because we need a decision as to what is the proper place of a neither confirm nor deny claim in our courts of law in this country. Are we going to go that far? That I can be put to trial for something I think, as Ian Cunliffe is reported, who wrote in Sydney Morning Herald, perhaps The Age yesterday, can I be put to trial for something that didn't happen or may have happened, didn't happen? I mean, that's the absurdity of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned Ian Cunliffe, because he has said Australia has never faced such a challenge to its status as a fair democratic country. We must fight and never surrender. I stand ready to do what I properly can do to fight the authoritarians. Now, that's something, Hugh, which I'd like to get a comment from Jay about, but since that will take a little bit of time, Bernard, would you like to chip in on that?
Look, after the raid on my chambers, the Hallowed Trinity College in Cambridge effectively offered asylum to my team, myself. I got this wholly fraudulent title there as Senior Academic Visitor. And that was because their second most senior fellow had been described in The Hague as complicit in the breaches of Australia's national security. That was an extraordinary comment to have been made by Australia, and particularly before an international court, of whom three of my leaders, Sir Elihu Lauterpach's students, were on. Even the Russian judge leaned forward in shock when Sir Elihu Lauterpach stood up and said, well, I haven't got much to say today because the other side have seized our brief. I mean, Australia is diminished. It's diminished in the eyes of our colleagues, Julian in the United Kingdom. You don't lightly imply that the second most senior member of the bar in the United Kingdom is complicit in law-breaking, particularly a member of the bar, Distinguished Knight of the Realm, a wonderful person, and Sir Elihu Lauterpach. And I was, all of my team, deeply ashamed. In fact, when we went back into our robing room, some of my team wept. We were so deeply ashamed of our country, deeply, deeply ashamed. And we're insulated to some extent, particularly with COVID-19, from the reactions abroad. But I wasn't surprised when today it was announced that Covictus has declared Australia now not a free democracy, but a narrow democracy. This is awful. This is, we must fix this. It's not just my trial. This is, my trial is no longer whether I gave a secret away to a foreign power. I mean, as if. This trial is about whether we have rule of law in this country, whether we are a democratic country, and whether our courts can stand up to the executive, and whether provisions of law that say a judge of our court must give the greatest weight to the opinion of a young federal attorney general. Now, I'm touched by the Second World War, won't go into that, but I was looking at the National Security Act 1939 the other evening. Do you know, with a barbarous and bestial aggressor threatening Australia in 1939, and after the sack of Nanking, the massacre in Nanking, we knew what could be faced if the Japanese invasion reached our shores. Not even in that emergency, facing such a bestial prospect, did our Parliament deny judges the right to close a court. Section 8 of the National Security Act 1939, passed by Robert Menzies, Evatt, Curtin, Chifley, all those members of Parliament, Beazley, that left the power to close a court in national security trials to the judges. How is it that we've gone away from what we didn't do facing an invasion. It just shows the excess of executive power in this country and how it must be reined back. It has to be reined back.
Well, that leads naturally to a question which has come from a couple of quarters. How can we help you and Witness J and Witness K?
Those black letter laws can potentially see me in jail if I don't get an open hearing. It's not me who should be on trial. We need to watch ourselves, Julian, as you know. It's not me who should be on trial. It's not me.
I agree completely.
It's
and I hope that people taking part understand why that is the case. So, has a trial date been fixed for your hearing yet?
No. We will most certainly appeal the decision by a single judge to allow me to be tried on a neither confirm nor deny basis in secret. And thus, the defence I wish to bring, which would wholly implicate others, will not be heard in public.
I don't know if that deals with this question, but do the rules of legal professional privilege still apply to your trial?
Yes, indeed. Yes. Yes, I suppose so, but do you know what I'm dying to do, Julian? I would love to go and talk to Penny Wong. I'd love to go and talk to Mark Dreyfus, unforbidden. Yet I read in the papers that Attorney General Porter and officers of the Attorney General's Department have been briefing Penny Wong and Mark Dreyfus. Now, those Section 22 orders, that are the secrecy orders that we can't talk about anything, are imposed on me, my lawyers, my colleagues, the community, everyone. The court staff were warned. The judge, indeed, I've sat in a court and heard an attorney warn a judge that these penalties were applicable from the bench down. Now, what are they doing briefing Mrs. Dreyfus and Wong when I can't?
Yeah, fair question. There's a question here for Witness J. I don't know how long it'll take you to get it through to him, Hugh. The question is, do you ever fear for your safety from possible adverse action from your former employer?
Yeah, so Jay and I spoke about this, and I've got a fairly consistent response. And essentially, he doesn't fear his former employer. The largest part of it, he feels 99.9% confident with his former employer and being safe from them. It's actually more the foreign actors and the foreign intelligence services that he's more afraid of, and that has a twofold effect. There's the physical effect of that foreign intelligence organisations and their agents are very good at getting rid of people, and obviously with what's been in the media and that sort of thing, there is interest around that. But the other point that Jay's more concerned about is actually foreign actors trying to influence him and act against Australia. Now, he makes assurances that would never happen, and that Australia is loyal to Australia. However, these people do have big sticks and carrots, and I'm sure that they would be very intimidating, and that is a genuine concern of Jay, is that these people would try to influence him against his country.
Julian, could I come in and comment also? I mean, the mere fact that there is a Witness K should tell the Australian people that there is morality and integrity in that agency. That tells you that there are courageous, decent people in the service of our country. I'm a great supporter of our intelligence services. They're necessary. It's their proper management. The maintenance of their morale is vital, and we have to be even-handed and decent. You do recall there was a major Soviet defector in 1992. Following that major defection, the United States and Britain came to Canberra during Paul Keating's prime ministership, and close to, I don't want to be specific, but close to 10 intelligence officers in an agency were quickly retired. These are issues that have to be dealt with evenly. Why is Kay being put through this, and why were up to 10 officials retired after a major defection in 1992? This is not secret, it's reasonably well known, but it doesn't seem to be even-handed to pursuit of Kay when persons who were quickly retired, I've got to watch myself, swiftly retired following a major Soviet defection. So we lack proper oversight of our agencies at a parliamentary level. The Intelligence Committee of Parliament, I'm abbreviating its name, has no role on operational matters, no role at all. And I think the vast majority of Australians think that the matter that I'm associated with relates to improper conduct, of no gain to Australia, certainly no economic gain, loss, certainly nothing to do with defence, because we need to keep Timor as an unsinkable aircraft carrier on our trade routes, and absolutely nothing to do with foreign relations to keep that country uptight as it had been for 10 years about its treaties, could not be consistent with developing effective foreign relations. On every one of the 3 planks upon which the Intelligence Services Act authorised the agency to act, there was a gross failure. It was a most stupid, unintelligent operation that should never have happened, and it should have been allowed to go away quietly. And Kay was prepared not to press for a finding of unlawful conduct, with presumably the compensation that should follow. We won't go into the constructive dismissal aspects of it all, but it's been brought alive by this young attorney. Why? Why? What is the reason why Australia's been dragged down again in our region? Why? Another bad decision?
Could be. Now, Hugh, can I give you another question for Jay? He says, I have recently read Witness Jay's book, Here There Are Dragons, which you and I have both read. I'd recommend to anyone wishing to hear more about his story. I'd love to hear more about your story. Maybe we can share a chat over Dr. Pepper one day. I frankly don't know quite what that question means, but there it is. And there's also a question whether an ICAC would help the schmozzle.
Julian, I have an answer from Jay actually, and Jay's currently writing a book, Roman a Clef, which is a fictional story, a fictional novel about a spy. So stay tuned for that. But maybe one day we'll see Jay's story. We don't know.
Well, that raises a question for me. Bernard, are you going to write a book?
Well, I wrote a book.
Oh yeah, of course, the one that was released just recently.
But Troubled Water, Melbourne Uni Press. But you do know that the manuscript was out, and then I received letters saying if I revealed secrets, I could face 10 years jail. We went ahead, and I got the summonses. There's an issue there, but good on Melbourne Uni Press having the courage to go ahead with it. But will I write a book that covers the matters that have been quenched and made secret? I think there should be public trials. The irony is there should be public trials of the real malefactors in this matter, and those trials would enable many others to write a pretty good book about a day of reckoning.
Yes. Well, I hope Jack Waterford would be there every day of the hearing. Has an approach been made to the Law Council of Australia for help? The matter threatens the entire profession. I believe law societies and bars should get involved.
Yes, Pauline Wright, who's the current, as you know, Julian, head of the Law Council, rang me the other day. She is engaged. She's looking into the issues prudently and carefully. My difficulty is in being able to brief anyone but my cleared and approved lawyers. I mean, it's common knowledge that Kay was approved to see me, that he had a letter from the Inspector General saying he could take, if he wanted, private legal proceedings, and so on and so forth. But the essence of it is that our profession is under dire threat. Mm.
And it's only members of our profession like you who can actually help save it.
Well, and that's why, in some respects, there can't be a cowardly retreat now and leave those secrecy orders on me. I really need to have a full public hearing. We've agreed from the very beginning there's no issues of national security need to be raised in my trial. My defence is clear. It should be obvious to everyone this evening whether you can be prosecuted. Is it a crime to report a crime? And the Australian public are entitled to know what the morals, principles and ethics are of those who serve us as ministers of the Crown. Entitled to know.
Now, Bernard, I think that Jay has got a question for you, which, if that's the case, I'll get Hugh to ask.
Perfect. So Jay asks, was it worth it? What would you do differently for people going down the same path as you in the legal profession, and perhaps more widely as well?
Well, there's only one person I've ever just flatly refused to act for. That was Ivan Milat, but that was because one of our daughters was hitchhiking, and I couldn't, couldn't give a proper mind to it, and I was certain the police had botched the job anyway, and he hadn't been alone. But now I couldn't turn witness K away. I can't. I wouldn't forgive myself. You can't. As a lawyer, I'm not going to be scared. You can't be too scared. The approvals were there. In fact, there was no access to an administrative appeals tribunal. They have no public interest disclosure rights, those people. I could see an appalling morale issue. Someone rang me recently and said, Collaery, tell the truth. Kay isn't a whistleblower. No one knows who he is. He's never spoken a public word or asked for a public word. I said, indeed. He said, so tell the truth. He's the leader of a mutiny, wasn't he? I said, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. I did want to say earlier that it's a good agency when there are people like Witness K. I can't go further. But I would do much the same, although I would have shifted my brief and my records out of my country. You do know that I had to stay abroad after that. My team of Australian lawyers, we had been put at risk by this public raid that told the world we might act for a spook or maybe other spooks. I had young Aussie lawyer staff, and suddenly overnight, the Australian government had revealed the connection to my practice of Witness K, and profoundly. And I stayed out of the country, and how many lawyers in my place will act again, for example, for a sovereign country. The new foreign interference laws have very cunningly made any activity that affects Australia's economic activities, no longer economic well-being, Australia activities, as potential sabotage and treason. So it's narrowed the scope of our capacity to act for countries in the Pacific, Kiribati, and I had a brief in Vanuatu on occasion, and matters like that. So yes, I do it again, but I would take protective measures for my staff, and I would tell them there's a possibility the Australian government might reveal the case, disclose the case, as it did in my case. We had arranged for there to be a confidential hearing at The Hague under very strict rules. We'd appointed eminent judges. It was to be heard in private. The whole thing was blown sky high while we were asleep in The Hague. And my public comments to the ABC, I got to stress, were after that in line with advice I took at very senior level and in line with the law as the High Court sees it. Australian public are entitled to know of executive misconduct. It can't be hidden.
Thank you, Bernard. Can I say I agree completely with that sentiment? And we were due to finish about a quarter of an hour ago. So I want to thank all of you who've received Voltaire Awards tonight, and of course Dujuan Hoosan, the Voltaire Human Rights Award to Dylan Alcott, and Bernard and Witness J for the Empty Chair Award. I would also like, on rounding off, to thank our volunteers and others who've made all of this possible, especially Grace Girardi, Jessie Taylor, who's the former president of, immediate past president of Liberty Victoria, Julia Kretzenbacher, Andrew Rawson, Sally Ann Ra, Jill Rochelle, Hugh, who was the J for the day, and Thomas Kane. So thank you all, and let's keep this organisation going. So if you have the opportunity to donate, I hope that what you've heard tonight will make you realise that it's something that is seriously needed in this country right now. Thank you. Thank you all, and good night.